Hey there, welcome to the next lesson in my course on creating 5-year financial models in Excel. If you haven't seen the previous videos, you can find links to them in the description below. And if you want to download the Excel files and follow along, you can do so on the first link in the description below. Now let's get back to Excel. In the last video, we tackled the cash conversion cycle and we calculated our net working capital and change in net working capital that we will later use when we're building our cash flow statement. In this video, let's focus on the property, plant, and equipment schedule. Let me just add some space here and let's copy another header, paste it down here and name it property, plant, and equipment. The way we'll build that is we'll have the PP opening balance. Then we'll have a depreciation, which reduces the balance. Then we'll have CapEx or capital expenditures, which increase our balance. And we'll have our PP closing balance. This is what we're aiming to calculate. So let's go ahead and format it a bit. So our opening balance, we don't have it for 2020. We only have the closing balance. And since this is going to be different from the rest of the closing balance formulas, let's color it in dark orange or dark brown or whatever. So let's go to the balance sheet and find property, plant, and equipment. And that's our closing balance. So our opening balance for next year will be equal to that. And this is going to be carried over. And then this will be a sum of those three. And let's carry that over. Our depreciation, we already have it in our income statement. And I'm just going to link it with a negative sign because here it decreases my balance. And if you remember, our expenses are presented as positive numbers. Just going to link that here, copy it with Control R to the side. And here we need our CapEx. And this is going to be equal to, again, with a negative sign because we're going to grab that from our cash flow statement. It's our investment in property, plant, and equipment. And here it's a negative because it's a cash outflow, but we want it as a positive up here because it's increasing our balance. Copy that to the side. And from here are our assumptions. Let me just format those. And I'm actually going to make them red because they are assumptions, but we're not going to be typing them in. So the reason for that is that in most cases, when it's not a property, plant, and equipment heavy business, it's not a business that relies heavily on investment, as it appears that this holding entity is. What we usually do is we'll just have CapEx being equal to depreciation. So going forward, we keep the same balance of PPE. We just make it equal to the depreciation above, and we have our closing balance, and we can link it. Keep in mind, if it's a business that relies heavily on investment, usually our CapEx will be coming from a plan for capital expenditures that might have like 5 or 6 projects that we're going to list here and outline how much are we going to spend each year. And in such situation, our depreciation will no longer be a percentage of some baseline. Like in this case, going to be calculated based on an average useful life, average depreciation percentage, and so on and so forth. We're going to look at how to build that in one of the other tabs that we're going to be developing later in the course. Now let's go ahead and link our PPE in our balance sheet equals to our PP balance. Copy that to the side, and that's it for our property, plant, and equipment. Now let's go ahead and take a look at our Goodwill. I'm gonna copy the header here, paste it here, rename it to Goodwill. And for Goodwill, we'll usually have an opening balance, some acquisitions, which will generate goodwill. We may have some impairment or something like that, but That's usually quite complicated to calculate and estimate unless we have historical data that we can rely on. So for the purposes of a strategic model like this, I usually wouldn't bother too much with Goodwill. Here we'll have our Goodwill closing balance. Copy the formatting from up here. So our closing balance here will be Goodwill. And you can see that Goodwill didn't change. So the opening balance is this going forward, and the closing balance is the sum of those. Keep in mind, we will be doing acquisitions in this model, but the way we'll set it up is that whenever we build, let's say, the acquisitions pipeline, all the Goodwill that we recognize will be part of this. And all the Goodwill that we recognize by acquiring the Rockcode acquisition, it's also going to be recognized within the model for Rockcode. The idea is that we'll have a config tab where we'll be able to switch different portions of the model on and off. And we want to make sure that the Goodwill recognized for a specific acquisition is part of this acquisitions model. So if we decide to see how the company would perform without doing the acquisition, this Goodwill won't be accumulated in our consolidated view. Therefore, this here, just gonna leave it empty. I'm not gonna model anything here, and I'm just gonna link my Goodwill in the balance sheet. It's pretty much gonna remain the same. Let's also go ahead and do our equity schedule. I'm gonna add a few more lines here. Grab a heading. Here we're gonna start with the equity opening balance. We're gonna have our issued equity and our equity closing balance. That's not equity, that's share capital, but you can use those interchangeably in most of the times. And another thing that we need is our retained earnings opening balance, our current year result, any dividend payments, and our retained earnings closing balance. And this is going to be formatted the same way. Our equity balance, just make it reddish brown or dark orange or whatever. It's going to be the closing balance of equity capital. The opening balance is going to be this. Move it to the side with Control R, and this is going to be the sum of the above two. Here, in a more complex scenario, you might have also buyback of equity. So if a company issues share, then they can do a buyback of those shares. And this would also be listed here with a negative sign, and it would impact the closing balance. The issued equity, we're going to leave it as a concept. If at some point we decide to raise more capital, we can link that here. But for now, let's just leave it at 0. Similar for the retained earnings, our closing balance in the first period will be retained earnings from here. This will be translated to the opening balance. Copy it over to the side, and this will be the sum of those. My current result will be equal to my income statement result. And that's our accumulated retained earnings. You see that we're accumulating a lot of losses here, but the idea is that the other entities would make up for that when we aggregate everything. But it's just cleaner to keep those separate, because that way you can have a clear picture of the specific impact that each tab, be it an entity or new product or something else, you can clearly see the impact that each element has on the whole picture. Just copy that over here, make sure we're not paying any dividends. And let's link that in our retained earnings balance over here. And actually, let's link our equity capital first. So equity. And this is our retained earnings. And copy those to the side with Control R. Let's add some comments on the side here. So this is our cash conversion cycle. This is also the cash conversion cycle, and this as well. Our intercompany receivables, I'm just gonna say remains the same, and we're gonna do that for all intercompany balances because those get eliminated at the end, so it doesn't make sense to forecast them. This equal to the previous one, Control R to copy it over to the side. Our cash balance will come from our cash flow statement, which we're gonna build in the next videos. This is from our PP schedule. It's our Goodwill schedule. Our investments will remain the same as well because we will be doing more investments to make additional acquisitions, but those will be handled in their separate tabs. Our intercompany payables will also remain the same. And our other liabilities will remain the same. And this is our debt schedule. Copy that to the side, and this is equal to this 0 as well, and copy that to the side. And now our debt schedule is an inconsistent formula because the ones above it and below it link differently. Just gonna hit ignore error. This is our equity schedule, and this is also our equity schedule. So let's go ahead and start linking our cash flow statement. First, let's link our cash balance to our closing cash balance down here. Copy that to the side, and let's go ahead and start linking stuff here. So our net earnings, I'm gonna link those from the income statement. We need to add the depreciation and amortization as a positive number because it's an add back. So we just link it as it is. Then our interest, same thing, equals, and grab our interest from the income statement. And the changes in working capital, just go up here where we calculated our change in net working capital. You can see that this is calculated properly because it's negative in the previous period and it was negative. So just grab it as it is. Grab those and copy them to the side. Next thing is we need our investment in property and equipment. Gonna be with minus because it's a negative, it's a cash outflow. So we go up here and we link it to our CapEx. Copy that to the side. Those here are acquisition of goodwill, investment in subsidiaries, and dividends income. We don't have those, but let's just link them anyway. So we have acquisition in our goodwill schedule. So I'm gonna do it with a negative sign. Go up here to goodwill and grab the acquisitions. And also for dividends income / payment, we have our dividends payment up above. Also not planning any dividend payments for now, but it's easy to change that. Copy that to the side, format this as number, and copy it to the side. And we're not gonna be modeling any investments and subsidiaries here. Issuance and repayment of debt. This is gonna be our principal repayment. So this is gonna equal our debt amortization from up here. Our issuance or repayment of equity, we're gonna grab our issued equity, which is 0 for now, and copy that over to the side. All those checks became zeros, which means that cash is linked, so it's okay. The net income matches, so we linked it correctly. Depreciation and interest match as well. If we go up here, we see that we still have a mismatch between our assets and liabilities. And I think the issue is that here we only linked the repayment of debt, but actually interest is also a cash outflow. So we need to add it here. Plus, go to our debt schedule and grab the interest expense as well. Copy this to the side with Control R, and you can now see that all those zeroed out and our assets and liabilities now match. And there you have it. So we grabbed the 3 periods of historical performance, we applied some overall assumptions, prepared a few schedules, and we now have a 5-year outlook for our holding entity. Now that we have this structure in place, in the next section, we're going to look at how to replicate it and build the remaining models for the remaining entities much faster and much easier. Thank you for watching another part of the course. As soon as the next video is uploaded, you'll find it right here. By the way, if you can spare a minute, I would love to hear your thoughts on the course and whether it's living up to your expectations. If you're watching on the website, you can do so by the feedback button up there. And if you're watching on YouTube, just drop a comment down below. Thank you.